Today I want to talk about the economy. We'll start with financial news, then we'll switch to sports. Home sales back in February have skyrocketed, which is a good sign for the housing market. So, we talk a lot about on this program about the Federal Reserve Bank and interest rates, inflation, the economy. So, big part of the economy obviously is the housing market. Jumped 14.5% last month from January, and that means 4.58 million houses were sold in the month of February. So that's a really strong number. And even though interest rates are much higher than they were about a year ago, I think right now interest rates are about 6% if you want to buy a house. A few months ago, they were about 7%. So I know I bought a house in 2019, and that was 4.5% interest. If we can get back to around 5%, I could see a real healthy housing market coming back in 2024, maybe even this year, which is a good sign. Also on the financial news, stocks had 2 days in a row where they've been up, so that's pretty good news. Oil price is 69. Corn is 630. Wheat is 683. Soybeans is 1467. Cattle is 162. Sugar is 20.8. Orange juice is 238. Gold for an ounce of gold is 1979, which is pretty much exactly what it's been for about a year now. It's kind of strange. And silver, same thing. Silver went way up during COVID. I think it was about $16 an ounce for silver back before COVID. Now it's sitting at it went up to like 21, 22, 23. Now it's sitting at about $22. So I don't know. It's really just, it's hard to gauge what direction the economy is going right now. Jobs are being created. People are buying houses again, which is a good thing. I know today the Federal Reserve Bank is supposed to announce if they're going to raise interest rates again. I have a feeling they're going to raise interest rates, but it might be a quarter point, which is, a slower pace than they have been raising interest rates. So how do you think that decision is going to come down today?
Well, I'm in agreement with you. I think they're going to raise it again. And they keep creeping it up like a quarter, a half a point at a time. But it's a steadily upward trend of, increases in the prime. And, the economy seems like it's bouncing back. It's getting stronger. I just don't see the point in continually raising the interest rates. I just don't see, what they feel what yields they're curing. If everything is trending upward, why do you want to increase interest rates again? I don't get it.
I think today they should leave it be. They should, if anything, they should cut interest rates, but they're not going to do that. So I say just leave it be. Keep the rates as they are for 3 more months, and that should. I think the most important thing in an economy is, you have to have assurance that in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years, how to plan accordingly. If you have a small business, you have to know what your tax rate's going to be for 5 years, 10 years. If you have uncertainty in the economy, that's what causes layoffs. That's what causes people to not to buy that first house. In this report this morning, it says about 30% of the new houses that were bought last month were first-time home buyers. So that's a good number, but you want that number to be always around half. That's what they say. If you have, like, in a month, if you have 4 or 5 million houses sold, if roughly half of those people are first-time home buyers, that's always a good thing to get those people in the market. But as for today, when we do our episode next week, we can talk about whether they did raise interest rates. I think they meet every 3 months. So if they raise interest rates today, that would mean whatever they set it at, that would take us out to June. Now, the episode you and I did last week, although it got lost in the ether, we were talking about all the bank failures that happened in March. So we'll just run through that again. We had 3 banks that failed in the United States within a 3 or 4 day window, and that was about 2 weeks ago now. So there was Silicon Valley Bank, and there was Silvergate Bank, and there was a third bank. I can't quite remember the name of it. This caused a ripple effect. First Republic Bank, which is a very large institution in the U.S., that one almost failed. It was on the verge of collapse until 5 or 6 larger banks came in and bailed it out. So you've had the federal government come in and bail out 3 banks now that have failed. They've created extraordinary new programs, new federal programs in association with the Treasury to kind of ease um, the worry on the economy. You've had extraordinary responses from um, larger institutions kind of swooping in and bailing out these regional banks. So there's a lot going on with banking right now. Janet Yellen made a speech, and she's the Secretary of the Treasury. She used to be the Chairman of the Federal Reserve. So she made a speech, and she's trying to reassure all these bankers, saying that the situation is stabilizing. Stock market seems to be unaffected by what's going on in this banking crisis. So that's a good thing. Maybe this is just like a short window type thing. Maybe these were the only three banks that were going to fail, and everything will be smooth sailing here on out. What do you think?
I think it's too early to call, but one thing that even one bank fails is that I feel that the whole FDIC program is it's obsolete, it's outdated, and it's ridiculous to have a person that has millions of dollars in your bank, but their deposits are only guaranteed up to $250,000. It just doesn't work. And as you can see, the federal government had to intervene and come in and bail those banks out. So they need to revisit that. That law came into effect after the great stock market crash back in 2930, and maybe $250,000 was worth a heck of a lot, back then. But
That was millions back then, I'm sure.
yeah, that was millions, But now, I can't believe that they're still at that figure, and that has to be grossly upgraded, into today's dollars. I'm not putting all my millions in the bank if you're only going to give me $250,000 if the bank fails. That's not a very good deal, a very good trade-off.
No.
So
And if you want to start splitting all your assets up into different kinds of banks, that's when you start running the risk of being audited. Just because you start splitting your money up, then they're going to start raising questions. They're going to start looking twice, looking thrice into whatever you're doing. I think this crisis, though, we should mention, has a lot to do with cryptocurrency, which is not a real currency. It's digital currency that was created, I don't know, maybe a decade ago, not even. So within the last decade, this started to come out. It all started with Bitcoin. When I was in high school in 2014, it was like $500 a Bitcoin. Now it's something like $30,000 a Bitcoin. So I have lost a lot of money in crypto. I'll tell you that. So I'm never putting a dime in crypto ever again. I played with it.
Same here. I've
Yeah.
lost money in it. I'll never put another dime
No.
in it again.
Now, I don't understand it. And same thing with options trading. It's just one thing where you can make a lot of money. It can be lucrative, but you really need to know what you're doing. So, but these banks, they were over leveraged in crypto assets, so they say. And back in November or back in October of last year, federal regulators began to realize, the risk that these banks were running. But the only problem comes here. Back in 2018, when Donald Trump was in office, I guess there was a law that was weakened. And there were these regulations preventing banks from, investing in risky assets. And not only that, but they increased the scrutiny that the federal government would have on these banks. So, for example, if you were a bank and had $25 or $30 billion in assets, you would be subject to these banking regulations. And I think that came into effect in 2010 or 2011, sometime back then. In 2018, those laws were weakened, and a lot of people are thinking this is what led up to, what we're seeing now. So, I don't know. I think that's all connected.
And they should be regulated and very stringently because it's not their money. Now, if you
Right.
want to go out here and take your personal funds and go to the racetrack or the casino or whatever, so be it, But you're gonna take other people's money and tie them up in risky, very speculative investments. That's not right. Like you have to put their money somewhere where it's a safe. The return's gonna be a lot lower, but it's steady, and it's reliable. But some of these banks are getting caught up in the risky and investments and so on and so forth. I think that they do. I think they're very risky in the housing market. I feel that a lot of home loans are financed, and the people just aren't solvent enough to even afford the homes, and that's why you get this glutton of foreclosures. People get in there and they can stay afloat for a few years, and the next thing you know, foreclosure is coming down the pike. And it's just loan officers and real estate agents and brokers that all they care about is the commission. Once the deal is done, hey, I got paid. You on your own. Don't come to me, when you can't afford the mortgage anymore. So I think that they're too liberal with mortgages and et cetera. And there's times that banks have got in trouble with that, where you got a ton of these foreclosures coming down the pike as well.
And to buy a house now, it's insane. I mean, the average cost of a house in America, I think, is like $300,000 right now. There's no way that that's what it cost before COVID. There's no possible way that the average house was $300,000. So I think that's doubled in the last couple of years, because I used to work for U.S. Bank, and you're right, with the liberalism when it comes to these banks, they will give anybody a mortgage. If you work at McDonald's, you're making $10 an hour, you work full time, sure, we'll give you a $200,000 mortgage, no questions asked. I don't know if that's the case now, post-COVID, but that was like 2018, 2019. So if they'll give loans to pretty much anybody, they'll take it away just as quickly. You know what I mean? But I think it's a bubble right now because a lot of people are on COVID assistance and they've been on this COVID forbearance program. And once that goes up, it'll be the same situation as when, the food stamp program was pulled out from under them. And now with the student loan payments, they're gonna begin again starting next month. So COVID really changed the economy. It probably doubled the cost of a regular house in the United States. It doubled the cost of goods I don't know if that's the cause, but it definitely was the effect. But it did not double the amount that we make. It did not double our wages. You're still making $10 an hour, $12 an hour, yet your house is going to cost twice as much. So how are you going to make it?
How are you going to make it, And,
you got to work 2-3 jobs, and if you're on your own, it's even harder. And that's why I think a lot of people in my generation and the millennial generation before me are not having kids.
Right.
Can't afford it.
Can't afford it,
But that's not a good thing. If you stop having kids, we will become like Japan, and that's what you're seeing in Japan, where their population is getting so old because nobody had kids. Then you're running out of people. You're running out of workforce. You can't grow.
Sure.
So I used to feel real strongly about, anti-immigration, but I was telling Eric the other day, I feel so differently about that now, because as we become older, we're going to need so many people in this country that, I don't know. I think if you give citizenship to everybody who's already here, there's 11 million people who can get to work immediately, and then just keep the situation as is. We take in, 1 million people a year legally, but it's gonna take more. Because if we had a billion people in the United States, we would only have the population density of France. So we can fit more people in this country. But I think if we don't, and if we stop having kids, if we stop having babies, we're going to be just like Japan in 50, 60 years.
So I guess we're sort of getting to be the opposite of what China was, where they were overpopulated. And
Right.
They had a ban on having kids because it just had, too many people to.
So we should make them have kids.
Yeah,
2
right.
kids minimum,
So
every
like
person.
when you go to a club, we got a 2-kid minimum. You can't come in unless you have
Right.
2 kids. But the thing of it is, like you said, people are not having children because it's expensive. They can't afford it, and that has a lot to do with and especially with all the birth control and contraceptive methods that are available to folks. They're choosing not to have children. They can't afford it. They could barely afford to live on their own, and you add a couple kids into the equation, it's just the numbers just aren't adding up.
So how do you raise wages without a strike? You see the LA teachers, they're on strike right now because they want higher wages. They deserve higher wages, but they would strike all the time in the 60s and 70s when unions were powerful. They've lost a lot of their power in America. So how nowadays, how do we fight for higher wages?
Well, it's going to have to be the way I look at it, Javi. It's going to have to be some type of government intervention or oversight because, well, things that are funded are jobs that are government jobs. Quite naturally, they're in control of those. But in the private sector, business owners are so greedy, they just want to stuff their pockets. They're not trying to pay higher wages. And they're saying if I could pay you 10, $12 an hour, when I know I could afford to pay you double that amount, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to keep you down at the lower, uh, you know, hourly wage so I can drive my Lamborghini, and my private jet, fly that,
And
and
this is when the people get angry when they start doing the math.
yeah, but it's just flat out greed in the private sector. In the public sector, it's always about, oh, we're overspending and we're over budget and we're too far in debt and blah, 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 blah. So, the public sector is more of a tax issue. The private sector, I just feel it's a greed issue. Because how can a guy say like Jeff Bezos be projected to be the world's first trillionaire, and I think they said by the year 2026, but you're only paying your workers like $15 an hour, and they're slaving. I understand people that work for that company say they work you like slaves up in there. But
Right. So could he not be worth half a trillion and pay them $30 an hour?
sure. And I'm sure he could pay. He could double their pay and still be super wealthy. And what's the sense in having all this money? You can't spend it in 1,000 lifetimes. You can't take it with you.
It's
So
sick.
it's sick. It is.
It's hoarding. It's gluttony.
It's
It's I don't
gluttony
know.
and hoarding. And that's the problem that we have worldwide. That you have a fraction of the population that's controlling, 95% of the wealth, and everyone else is just left to struggle and, living on a day to day. Like the average wage earner, taking it back to what we were speaking of earlier, they're 60 days away from foreclosure. You get 2 months behind in your mortgage payment, I guarantee you a dollar to a dime, a bank's going to start foreclosure proceedings on you, you know? So, you have virtually no kind of stability whatsoever. If you get sick or any kind of, unforeseen circumstances that come up, you looking at utilities getting cut off, eviction, foreclosure, so on and so forth.
Now, what kind of government intervention is there besides raising the minimum wage?
And they won't even do that.
No. Since 2009, 2008, it's still $7 an hour.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I don't even.
It's crazy.
You know,
Here we are,
people-
2023.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. You can't even afford to pay rent in a decent, uh, neighborhood or whatever, making $7 an hour. So this is the world we live in. Minimum wage I think is a joke. that it should be, well, I guess they got state minimum wage guidelines. And
Sure, but even the state, I mean, state like Ohio is tied to inflation, but it only goes up 15 cents a year. So you so you might get $9 an hour instead of 7.
yeah, I think Ohio's $8 and some change, and it goes up like 15 cents, like you see in January. It's like, what can I do with this?
Right. So I don't know. I mean, they could raise the minimum wage. That would definitely make a difference, I believe. I don't know what else can be done besides changing the whole economic system that we've built here.
Yeah, it has to be something, uh, you know, drastic, because the world is really in a state right now, and there's too much poverty, and people struggling on a day to day.
And we're getting real close to, I mean, people don't realize how close we could become in this country, even though we're the wealthiest and we have the most. But I was reading back in the 90s, all these countries that were separated from the Soviets, they all had 60% inflation, 100% inflation, 200% inflation. And that could easily happen if our dollar becomes worthless. In Germany, they would have barrels full of dollars and wheelbarrows full of dollars that are totally worthless. Can't even buy a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread. So I'm not saying that's going to happen here, but I'm saying our dollar has already become not worthless, but a whole heck of a lot less worthful than it was even last year. So if you and I had a dollar in the bank a year ago, today that dollar's probably worth 80 cents, 85 cents. And you perpetuate that, if that inflation became 20%, 30%, 40%, then it could get to a point where you would have to fundamentally change the economic system to keep up with the inflation, because it could just run away from you. And I think it almost happened this time.
And the thing of it is, Harvey, is that the Federal Reserve is running around here. They keep raising the interest rates, but then the Treasury just keeps printing more and more and more money. That's where the problem comes in.
But nobody sees it. Nobody sees it.
You keep printing all this doggone money, and it's worthless. The more you print, the less value it holds, and the more of it that you need to maintain in life. And like you said, wages aren't going up, prices are going up, but wages are staying the same or even going down. In a lot of industries.
People would say, where are all the workers? I think a lot of the workers are staying on the sidelines because they're waiting for higher wages. They say, maybe if next year Target will be paying 25, maybe next year, Walmart will be paying 20. But I don't know. I think a lot of businesses have raised their minimum wage without being forced, and that's a good thing. But even so, if you take into account what's 10% of $15 an hour, that's $1.50. So that person should get $1.50 raise each year. That would be, if inflation's 10%, they should get $16.50 the next year. But it doesn't work like that.
There's got to be a way how we did. They got to figure out a way to redistribute the wealth worldwide. And we're going to be in the state we're in forever. Where you just got too small percentage of the population that's controlling all of the wealth.
27 people. I mean, there's basically 27 people who own more wealth than all of us. And that's a fact. I mean, you could look that up. So that's a group of people that have all the money on the earth. Okay, so how?
When I was growing up, we were supposed to be middle class. And my dad, he coined the phrase, he said we were affluently poor. That's what we were. We were poor. We weren't middle class. But Pop say, he said, yeah, we're affluently poor, but
that's
we're
hood
poor.
rich.
Yeah, it's hood rich, but like we struggled, man, to survive, because, I think the middle class, so-called middle class, is gone now. You're either rich or you're poor. Yep. One or the other. There's no in between.
It's better to be poor. It's better to be poor than middle class because you get all the government assistance. So if you're smart, you're gonna stay poor unless you see an opportunity to make it out of the middle class and straight from poverty to wealth. If you can't make it straight from poverty to wealth, you're better off staying in poverty because you're really not in poverty. You get help. Whereas if you're in the middle class, you're getting no assistance whatsoever. No FAFSA, no food stamps, no Section 8, no Medicaid, no all the things you need, the important things. And it's so like it's just so so arbitrary, right? Because it's like, okay, $1,600 for a person for a month, but if you make 1601, you get nothing. But if you make 1599, you get hundreds of dollars of assistance every month. So why would a person work more than they know they have to? You know what I mean? So it's a brilliant system, but it keeps us down to where, okay, I know if I'm making $10 an hour, I'm not going to pay any federal taxes. But if I make $20 an hour, they're going to take 20%. So I'm going to wind up making the same amount of money.
Right. And
it's backwards.
It's frustrating to me because our government, all the duly elected politicians and stuff, why can't you guys sit down? That's your job, is to come up with solutions to these problems, you know?
Now, their job is to be bribed and do what they're told.
Yeah, you know. And they're I don't care what party you talk about. They're patsies for big business.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the PACs and everything like that, they're the ones that put up the funds to get him in office. They keep him in the office. And, that's why I sort of, have lost faith in the political process because, all elected officials, they got to, they're held accountable to the rich and moneyed interests of the country because they put the funds up to get them elected.
Now, do you vote in the presidential elections?
I vote in all of them, all the way down to local.
Okay.
I feel it's my civic duty, but Javier, I feel like it's exercise in futility.
Mm-hmm.
When I vote, I feel nothing. I feel like it's not going to improve anything, whatever. I just feel like if I don't vote, that I don't have a right to go out here and complain. There's a lot of people that out here complaining, but they won't vote. And that one guy, that social commentator, Tavis Smiley, he said, for all of you people who didn't vote, shut up. I don't want to hear a word you got to say, because you got to vote.
Yeah, well, speaking of voting, Donald Trump might not be able to be the Republican nominee. It looks like he is predicting his own arrest, which is kind of interesting. There's a lot been going on, but I guess he has his own social media company. It's called Truth Social, and he posted on there that he believes he's going to be arrested within the next few days. So today is the 22nd of March, and we'll see if he's arrested between now and our next podcast. What I do know is that back during the presidential election, there was an actress named Stormy Daniels. By actress, I mean, an adult actress, all right? And she had a relationship with Donald Trump, and he did not want that to get out. So, to my understanding, Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, paid off Stormy with some of Trump's money. It's called hush money. We'll give you $100,000. I think it was $180,000. You won't speak. She listened, she took the money, but a couple years later, she decided she would speak. And Michael Cohen, the lawyer who arranged all of this, secretly recorded Donald Trump in his office back then, and that recording tape came out while he was running for president. So, I mean, all of this, I remember all this, and I believed way back then, I thought that they were going to take him out for this. I thought that this would have been an impeachable offense, and then when he was in office, I remember when there was the insurrection at the Capitol, he said on the phone, you just to that Secretary of State in Georgia, you just need to find me 30,000 votes. Find me 30,000 votes and I win this election. I thought that was going to be the impeachable offense, but they let that one slide. Looks like the New York grand jury might finally get him on some kind of indictment, but we'll see what happens.
Right. I think that's why he's predicting it, because it is a grand jury investigation. You got two ways you could do it. The prosecutor could indict him directly, or they could convene a grand jury, let them look at the evidence, and make a vote whether they want to return an indictment. So he must be getting smoke signals that he knows he's got. But
sure, Trump
I don't
used to live in Manhattan.
I don't understand why, if this is the way you're moving, why didn't you just step to this lady in the beginning and get her to sign an NDA?
That's another thing.
And
so there was a non-disclosure. Yeah, so there was a non-disclosure agreement that Trump never signed. Is that what happened?
It's something of the, I don't know the particulars about the NDA, but it didn't come up until sometime later on, And I think that's when Cohen stepped in with the monies, with the hush money, and then tried to negotiate an NDA at that time. And I
Okay.
don't think that she wanted
She
to
never
sign it.
signed it.
She never signed it.
Well, she didn't have to sign it. She had already got the money.
She already got the money. So they did
So he
it
didn't play
backwards.
this the way he should have played it. And I remember in the video, if you watch the video and listen to the video real closely, Trump is explaining to Michael Cohen how they go about it. And then he suggests that they pay her in cash. And Michael says, no, not cash. No, we don't do cash. What we're going to do is we're going to create a law firm, an LLC, and funnel the money through the law firm. And that's what happened. They created a law firm specifically to take money from Trump's campaign, funnel it through this law firm, and pay Stormy Daniels off that way. And because he did it that way, they're saying it's a violation of campaign finance.
Yeah, right.
So I could see how that could bring him down. I could definitely see how they could get him charged with that, and that could prevent him from running for president in 2024.
Well, I would think if the Republican Party is smart, they'll be happy if that event happens. Because
You think so?
yeah, because Trump, he has so much controversy and bad thing swirling around him. He's got that January 6th insurrection and so on and so forth. That he's not going to win. He just got too much dirt around him. Even with Hillary Clinton, that's the reason he got in the office.
She had too much dirt around
She
her.
had too much dirt around her. And people was like, no, I'm not voting for that dirty chick. She needs to be in prison, So
And that's how they feel about him today?
yeah, that's how they feel about. He's like, Hillary Clinton 2.0. And, I even watched some news programs where they say that Republicans are praying Democrats are praying that Trump gets the nomination.
Sure they are. If they beat him once, they can beat him again.
Yeah, because they know they can beat him.
Right.
You see, he's not a strong candidate for the Republicans. So
Now, do you think President Biden is a strong candidate for the Democrats?
I don't know. I look at his age as a detriment.
How old is he? 82, 83?
No, not yet.
Okay.
He was 78 when he came into office. He'll be 82, that will be what, next year? So I think he's 81 now.
He's getting up there.
Yeah, he's getting up there. And he's talking about running for re-election, so that'll make him 86.
Now, Kamala Harris is in her 50s.
Yeah, she's in her 50s. But
Could she beat a Republican?
I don't think so. What my personal theory on that, Javi, is that even with Hillary, I just feel that this country is still sexist to the point that I just don't feel that they'll elect a female president. I really don't.
We had a black president before we had a female president.
We did.
We could have a Hispanic president before we have a female president.
I agree. But I think that you got tons of undercover sexists in this country, and I just don't feel that men are going to vote for a female to be president.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because I felt that Hillary couldn't win, and I voted for her.
I did too. Now, we do have a woman running on the Republican side. So her name is, what's her name? Nikki Haley. If Trump gets indicted, she's immediately on the forefront. However, if Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, gets in, I would say he's number one after Trump. At least that's how it stands today in March, but we got a long way to go.
I personally think that DeSantis is going to be their guy.
Okay.
That I think that he'll get the nomination.
I got to start looking into him then.
Yeah, you need to start looking into him. But I think that he's the one that has set himself up, and I think that he's going to get the Republican nod.
He's in his 40s.
Yeah, and that fares well for him too. Somebody with some younger people, that aren't so challenged age-wise. I don't know how all of a sudden, the leadership became so old.
That's because
Like,
80 is the new 70, Carlos.
is that what that is?
90 is the new 80. You're just gonna. We'll have a
Because
100-year-old president soon.
because hypothetically, if Trump got elected again, he would be he's only 4 years younger than Biden.
Sure.
He'll be 78 going into office, and he'll be this 82 just like Biden is on his term.
That's
So
crazy.
he's not a spring chicken either,
The
So,
presidential nanny is going to be a full-time job here pretty soon.
yeah, yeah. I think I'm pretty sure that Biden's going to be the Democratic nominee. That there's
I do too.
nobody that I don't even think they even tried to groom anybody or set him up, as a nominee.
Well, I said this before. Biden has never lost an election, ever.
Well, that's
see.
good. He's the Michael Jordan of politics.
Guess so.
Jordan never lost a championship.
He's not MJ. He's JB.
Right.
Well, that ends our show today. Thank you for joining me, Carlos. Appreciate your time.
You are listening to
Enphinity Radio.